Bonjour, ici Claudia La Rochelle à Montréal.
And I'm Hal Wake in Vancouver. This year and in 2021, Canada's the guest of honor at the Frankfurt Book Fair. The pandemic required us to adapt our programming, but our goal remains the same, revealing our singular plurality on the world stage to showcase some of Canada's finest writers and illustrators. As they can't be in Frankfurt this year, this is an opportunity for us to present them to you virtually in the comfort of your own home or wherever you may be. We're happy you're joining us today as we explore the writer's role in helping us combat despair.
Les perspectives liées à l'avenir de la condition humaine semblent sombres. Nous faisons face à des crises environnementales, sociales et politiques. Dans cet épisode, nous nous questionnerons sur le rôle de l'artiste pour aider ses congénères à faire face à la calamité. Nous irons à la rencontre de 3 auteurs canadiens, question d'avoir leur point de vue sur le rôle et les responsabilités d'un écrivain au 21e siècle. Il s'agit d'Alex Olin, de Jocelyne Saucier et de Joshua Whitehead.
Alex Olin is a Canadian novelist and short story writer. She was born and raised in Montreal, Quebec, but now lives in Vancouver, BC, where she chairs the creative writing program at the University of British Columbia. She's the author of 5 books, most recently Dual Citizens, which was a finalist for the Scotiabank Giller Prize and the Rogers Writers Trust Fiction Prize. Her work has appeared in The New Yorker, The Walrus, Best American Short Stories, and many other places.
Jocelyne Saucier vit dans le nord du Québec. Elle a publié 5 romans, La vie comme une image, Les héritiers de la mine, Jeanne sur les routes, Il pleuvait des oiseaux et tout récemment, À train perdu. Et Il pleuvait des oiseaux lui a valu de nombreux prix, a été traduit en 15 langues, en plus d'être adapté au cinéma. Jocelyne Saucier est bien connue du public allemand. 3 de ses romans sont parus sur le marché germanophone.
Last up is Joshua Whitehead. He's a Two-Spirit OG Cree from Peguas First Nation. He's the author of Full Metal Indigiqueer and the novel Johnny Appleseed. It does sometimes seem like the world's problems are multiplying and becoming more intractable. We asked our guests what issues concern them the most.
Ce qui m'inquiète le plus, évidemment, c'est l'environnement. Les changements qui sont apportés par tous les dégâts qu'on fait à l'environnement, on les vit, nous, qui habitons dans le Nord, de plus en plus. Là. On voit des animaux qu'on ne voyait pas auparavant. Là. On voit vraiment ces changements-là. Ce qui nous menace ici, avec les changements climatiques, avec l'assèchement, la hausse de la température, ce sont les feux de forêt. Et ça, c'est vraiment inquiétant.
A lot of my work has to do with what it means to be a witness to the pain of other people and what it's like to live through the aftermath of that pain. And I think of that in relationship to a lot of different scales of trauma. It can be something very small and personal, like an abusive or neglectful childhood, or it could be something on a much larger scale. I think a lot of my stories are about people struggling to move themselves step by step out of despair and toward a better condition.
Very concerned about social issues. In thinking about myself as an Indigenous writer who's also queer, what we need to do is kind of normalize again conceptions of two-spiritedness, which we've had since time immemorial in our communities, and really destigmatize, I would say, like homophobia, transphobia, which are very much brought about, I would say, by residential schools and the trauma from that. So it's working to heal both simultaneously, I think.
Nous avons demandé à nos auteurs, avez-vous des exemples de tentatives que vous avez faites pour aborder des enjeux difficiles dans votre écriture?
In my novel, Inside, there's an international aid worker who was present in the Rwandan genocide, and then when he returns to Canada, his own pain is then kind of rippled out to the lives of the people around him. So there's a sense in which trauma leads to connections and to consequences for people across multiple kind of time zones, scales, countries, and cultures. And in some of the different moments of the book, a person who was a helper character, a rescuer in one narrative strand, returns later in the book to be in need of help. So the idea, I suppose, is that at any moment in our lives, we could find ourselves in need of help or in the position of being able to help someone else.
Johnny Appleseed is very much, it's about, basically, it's an exploration for me of what it means to be an urban, contemporary, two-spirited person who does online sex work, who makes ends meet, but also has this like profound love for everyone, even though the world continually harms and hurts him and belittles him. He finds ways to, quote unquote, like transform pain into love. So I really wanted to show like the vivacity and the sexiness, and to use a bit of indigenous slang, like the deadliness of what it means and what it looks like to be two-spirited in 2018 is when I wrote it, but in the now.
Dans Il pleuvait des oiseaux, je ne savais pas que ça allait m'amener à parler de la vieillesse, de l'amour grand âge et de la mort librement consentie. La mort, moi, c'est sûr que ça m'obsède parce que dans ma vie, dans ma famille proche, il y a eu plusieurs morts violentes. J'ai eu accidents, suicides. Et dans ces cas-là, la mort est tout à fait est inacceptable. Elle est irréelle, elle est trop brutale, elle est trop violente. Dans Il pleuvait des oiseaux, ces gens-là ont une pensée libre et ils vivent en forêt. Ils ont tout cet espace-là qui leur appartiennent. Ils ont davantage le sentiment que leur vie leur appartient et donc que leur mort, la fin de leur vie leur appartient.
I think of my work as being extremely feminist and in asking questions about the issues that in particular face women today as they try to find independence and autonomy. There's no single path. There's no one correct way to mitigate your loneliness or to find success or to create a family. I'm always trying to show that there could be individualized paths towards fulfillment for all the characters. A last thing that I write about a lot is wilderness and nature and environmental concerns and climate change. So that idea that as human beings, we have a kind of responsibility or a kind of duty of care towards the natural world is something that's really important to me personally. And so it's, of course, reflected in my work.
One critical issue is, how does a writer touch on these things without appearing to be prescriptive or didactic?
So writing Johnny, I had a very specific community in mind of who I wanted to read. Queer, two-spirited Indigenous youth, and my own Indigenous communities. Again, I'm taking my knowledge from academia and putting it into the novel. But in order to not allow it to seem that I was like preaching or I was trying to really be didactic, what I was trying to do is tie Johnny, the character, with Joshua, with the person, keeping it personable and keeping it humanistic from my own point of view was the best way to kind of have these ideas and have these strategies that I wanted to use and deploy, but make them seem like it was just me talking to you rather than Johnny telling you what to do.
L'essayiste, lui, il a des idées élaborées, une thèse à présenter, donc il a des réponses à ces questions. Alors que le romancier n'a pas de réponse à ces questions, et c'est parce que justement, il n'a pas de réponse à ces questions qu'il va se poser la question dans ses romans. Donc il se lance dans ses romans et il va essayer de trouver un ordre dans le désordre.
There's a famous quote from Chekhov who said that the role of the writer is not to provide answers, but to pose the question correctly. And that's something that I think about a lot when I write. I don't think that as a writer I'm any wiser than your average person. I'm not a policy analyst or a prognosticator of the future. What I hope I'm able to do is to describe the human condition or to capture hear and observe and express something about the lives of my characters in a way that is meaningful in relationship to the issues that I care about, and I hope it winds up being meaningful to the reader as well.
Nous en sommes tous conscients et maintenant plus que jamais, notre monde est fragile. Nous avons posé la question suivante. Lorsque vous écrivez, restez-vous conscient de la précarité de notre monde ou tentez-vous de laisser ces préoccupations en dehors de votre écriture?
When I'm writing, it's this moment of transfiction, I think, that I have, where I can, when I sit down to write, I don't have a fully outline of be like, I'm gonna write about topic A and I'm gonna be talking about BLM. For me, it's just everything that we're kind of surviving through and living through and reading and experiencing always automatically spill into the story that I'm trying to tell. I can't sit down blankly and be like, I'm gonna write this story today and here's this, the story begins and just go like that. I really need to have some type of anchor or structure of what I'm doing so that the work is always responding to the time. Even if I'm sitting down to perhaps not write about a social issue or an injustice, it's always gonna sneak its way into there. Maybe we're more like dandelions, a weed that's a pest in the yard, but pretty to look at. Yeah, an Indian home is like a dandelion, pretty but disposable, and imbued with a million little seeds that dissolve into wishes for little white hands that pluck. I would say I don't feel I have to write about these issues. I think it's more so that I'm called upon to do it. So it's always, first and foremost, going to be of me trying to write what I'm doing and how I'm doing it and give strategies, I would say.
I don't think a novel is a message. It's not a neon sign, and it's not a political platform. That said, politics and the novel are inextricable because politics are part of our lives. So for me, what I hope people take away is a greater understanding and empathy towards the lives of people who may be very different from themselves. They may never have experienced the exact same things that happen to the characters in my book, but perhaps they have a greater understanding. Perhaps they have a greater sympathy for some political ideas or experiences that they might not otherwise have had if they hadn't read the book. Robin didn't talk much about her life at school. She never did very well there because she was like Marianne, paying attention only when she felt like it, learning only what she wanted to, not liking being told what to do. She had difficulty concentrating, except when it came to music. And perhaps just as importantly, she didn't mind being scolded, didn't care when her report cards noted that she could certainly do better if she tried harder.
Le roman, c'est d'abord une quête de sens. Ce besoin de créer un univers, ça vient du fait que je suis moi aussi dans ce monde de chaos, dans tous les bouleversements, dans ce questionnement sans fin. J'ai besoin de créer un univers, de créer un désordre et de trouver un ordre dans ce désordre. Et c'est parce qu'on a des questions sans réponse qu'on écrit. Donc, et on creuse toujours plus profondément pour comprendre. Je veux amener le lecteur aux mêmes questions qui ont suscité ce roman-là. Il y avait un pacte de mort contre mes petits vieux. Je ne dis pas suicide, ils n'aimaient pas le mot. Trop lourd. Trop pathétique pour une chose qui, en fin de compte, ne les impressionnait pas tellement. Moi, quand je me lance dans un roman, je ne sais pas où est-ce qu'il va m'amener. Au départ, j'ai un petit rien, une image, une phrase, une impression qui me laisse deviner que derrière ce petit rien, il y a un grand tout qui m'attend. En déroulant une vie, plusieurs vies, puis en m'approchant de cette part indicible qu'il y a dans nos êtres, dans nos vies, je trouve un sens.
Quel type d'obligation l'auteur doit-il remplir ou quelle responsabilité doit-il assumer dans ses écrits s'il y a lieu? Qu'en disent nos invités?
I don't necessarily think that artists have more social responsibility than anyone else, but I do think that as human beings, we all have social responsibility to care about other people. So I don't see artists as existing in a separate category. I think, like anyone else, they should approach their world and their relation to their work with kindness and generosity.
Je crois que l'écrivain a une responsabilité par rapport à ses écrits, parce que ses écrits vont vivre et peuvent vivre longtemps. Ils ont des impacts dans l'esprit et dans les actions des gens.
Those stories, those books, may well be read hundreds of years from now, just as we now read books from hundreds of years in the past. So you can't necessarily predict where your book will find the reader. All you can do is try to be truthful.
I think for a long time in the project of CanLit, it's been write about what you want without any type of criticism, or if one is criticized, you can easily say, well, it's an act of fiction. It's a poem, right? It's an essay. It's not tied to anything real or tangible. When in reality it is, like, stories are all we have, as Thomas King has taught us.
I think that part of the role of the artist is to be a witness, and that witnessing can mean a different thing to each different artist because there are as many different artists as there are people. So to be a witness might mean to record and remember the stories of your community, but also to be a witness might mean to critique your community out of love because there are issues that need to be raised. To me, that's a very socially responsible, even anti-authoritarian thing to do, to assert the right of the individual to inhabit a story. So there are as many different ways to approach it as there are kinds of books or novels or stories.
Je crois qu'il faut faire confiance à l'imaginaire du lecteur, à son intelligence. Il faut faire confiance au débat des idées. Quand on retrouve tout ce qui nous heurte, qui nous bouscule, qui nous trouble, c'est comme ça qu'on évolue. On a beaucoup évolué par rapport, par exemple, à l'homosexualité, au suicide. Donc, il faut faire confiance au débat des idées, mais on arrive à la liberté de création versus la censure. C'est ça qui arrive.
Our responsibility is to be ethic and moralistic. I just call myself a storyteller, or as in Korea would say, no tachimo, because a storyteller, their job is always to kind of provide guidance, to teach ethics and morality through the stories they tell, which are historic stories that mutate and transform as they're told again and again and again, like Banana Phone a little bit. But the stories are first and foremost for community survival, for community empowerment, and for community longevity.
I think it's important to write about these difficult subjects with nuance and sensitivity and try to present them in such a way that the reader can have a very real and authentic interaction with the story, and that you're not striving to kind of reduce how complex those experiences are.
C'est sûr qu'il y a une responsabilité, mais il faut toujours penser que c'est pas du côté de la morale. C'est du côté des personnes qu'il faut protéger et qui sont sans défense et qui ne peuvent pas participer au débat d'idées.
We do this important work, and we do it for the communities, and we do it for the betterment of people, but it's also a type of it costs us, almost like we were bloodletting as well. And no one's ever really kind of vocalized that to me, of like, what does it cost Joshua, the person, to write Johnny, the character? And it's a huge cost. But again, it's one I'm willing to pay. If that cost that I'm paying allows another Indigenous person or BIPOC person or queer person, whoever's reading these books and seeing themselves in it, to not have to pay that same price, that is like a plethora of treasure compared to the small little bits I paid.
To write from a place that is truthful from themselves, to write from generosity, that's the obligation of the artist.
Delving further into our conversation about hope against despair, we asked, have your ideas about the role of the writer changed or evolved since you started writing?
My ideas about the role of the writer have definitely evolved since I started writing. I came of age in an era when irony and detachment were very prevalent cultural modes. now I see a real shift. We're living in an era of great moral passion and sincerity. So it's a different time to write into.
Writing always does responds to the time it's written within. And it also shows kind of what it's being written about and how it's being written, how it's being deployed and depicted in whatever book that may be, is also a mirroring of that nation state. So yeah, my writing has very much changed since I was like a teenager, a young 20-year-old, to now, in that I guess I just came to believe that writing is always apolitic, and to maybe hone in on the suffix of history, which is story. It's a curated story thing. So I was like, I can also contribute to that larger story.
I myself also, as I've gotten older, have changed in terms of my personality. I was much more jaded and cynical as a young person than I am now. I'm much more earnest and becoming more and more idealistic as I get older. And for me now, as a writer and as a person, kindness and empathy and consideration towards others are much more important moral and artistic values than, for example, cleverness of execution, which was something I thought was really important when I was younger.
On n'a pas les mêmes valeurs morales aux États-Unis, en France, en Afghanistan, et on n'a pas la même morale avec le temps. Moi, je pense, par exemple, au Canada où l'homosexualité était criminalisée jusqu'en 1968-69. Joshua Whitehead n'aurait pas pu écrire ses livres en 1965. Aucun éditeur n'aurait publié ses livres. Donc, c'est sûr que la morale évolue parce que la morale change avec le temps. Elle change aussi avec les sociétés.
I think right now, like what we're doing is we're seeing a huge shift in who's being published, who is publishing, what are we publishing, and what are we like storing into the world. So it's rapidly changing. I think it's very hopeful for me. And I think what's being published right now demonstrates the stories we should have been telling the whole time.
Personne ne se tourne vers la lecture pour les mêmes raisons. Si quelqu'un y trouve du réconfort, un autre y puise des connaissances ou y trompe l'ennui. Nous avons demandé à notre trio, trouvez-vous du réconfort dans des lectures qui abordent des sujets ou des événements d'actualité? Ou cherchez-vous plutôt des livres qui vous permettent de vous évader?
La lecture, pour moi, c'est un moment privilégié, c'est un moment d'intimité, c'est un moment de rencontre avec l'autre. Je vais vivre une autre vie que la mienne. Et je vais m'enrichir de cette vie-là et d'une autre expérience humaine qui va m'aider à comprendre ma propre vie. La littérature, le roman permet justement d'aller à la rencontre de l'autre et de vivre d'autres vies que la nôtre. On se retire de la cacophonie du monde pour se retrouver seul. Seul avec soi, seul avec l'autre, seul avec le monde.
I'm a very avid reader. I remember being in the library when like 5 years old and like getting like C.S. Lewis and the Redwall series. I was very obsessed with science fiction like Ursula Le Guin. I've really tried to curate what I'm reading and who I'm reading. I think it's highly important that I too keep up to speed with that education and that knowledge to be able to apply it to my life, my writing, my communities too. But I find a lot of solace, I would say, in reading books that are responding to the contemporary, to the now. I do like a little escapism here and there, but I always reserve that for video games. I think literature and the act of reading, what I consume, gives me strategies of how to also produce texts that are going to be just as responsive and just as ethically and morally engaged with the politics system of reading, writing, producing, publishing. So I find I have a ton of solace in books.
For me, books were always the place that I felt at home, where I found ways of thinking and Sometimes I read because I want to educate myself about something that's going on in the world. Sometimes I read because I want to disappear from myself and forget myself for a moment. Sometimes I definitely read for escape. I went through a period where I read a lot of murder mysteries, and I think what I was drawn to was the idea that there could be a crime and then a resolution to the crime, because so often in real life there are terrible things that happen and there is no resolution for them. So the things that I'm looking for in books change and shift all the time, and often I'll return to something I read before and I'll discover that I read it in a different way because I've become a different person now. So to me that's kind of fascinating, is that a book is a conversation between a writer and a reader, and the book is the same every time, but the reader is different each time, and so the equation is infinitely variable.
Avec la lecture, on accède à la conscience de soi, à la conscience de l'autre, à la conscience universelle, ce que le Clésio appelait le grand concert de l'humanité. Et c'est pour ça que je crois que je vais faire mon plaidoyer pour la fiction, pour le roman, parce que je crois qu'on a vraiment besoin de la fiction, parce que c'est un puissant outil de connaissance. Parce que quand on lit un roman, on va dans un autre univers, puis sans défense. Et on découvre le sens de ce qu'il y a dans ces vies-là, et ça nous aide à comprendre notre propre vie.
I think that part of what we turn to in books is the sense of being able to hear the voices and the lived experiences of other people, to give us a greater sense of what's going on beneath the surface of these arguments that people are having, whatever they may be, political, environmental, or otherwise. So I think if people can turn to fiction, they can find greater access and greater understanding and a global perspective that is really meaningful.
The recent proliferation of different voices, experiences, and perspectives led us to ask this question: how can exposure to more diverse and out-of-territory stories change our understanding of despair and survival?
C'est très intéressant de voir ces voix-là qui nous parviennent de partout et qui nous parlent différemment de leur unicité. Chacun a son expérience unique de la vie qui peut parler à l'autre.
I think we're living right now in an era that is extremely fragmented, in which experiences are really multiple, and our understanding of the multiple voices and experiences within any individual country or region it's becoming more and more sophisticated. So I think part of what we're able to do when we read internationally and globally is to understand that multiplicity, right? That there is no single story to be told about a place or a people or a culture, that there are many stories.
I think social media has been like the best for that, of folks I never would have kind of heard of in like Southern US or New Zealand writers I never really would have known of, because our radars don't always intersect. Also expanded who I read as well and who I engage with. I can't say I ever would have engaged with people from New Zealand, and also got to meet so many cool Maori people as well, indigenous to the space of New Zealand. So it was really empowering for me to hear the Maori perspective of how they were and are impacted by settler colonialism. And for me, like, that kind of virtual community is also so very necessary.
La littérature, c'est la rencontre de l'altérité, c'est la rencontre de l'autre. L'autre peut vivre n'importe où, dans un plaid perdu du Tennessee, de tout ça. Et c'est ce que les écrivains font. C'est l'humain qui parle à l'humain. Donc, qu'on soit en Afghanistan, qu'on soit n'importe où, c'est l'universalité de la littérature qui parle.
I also think that when we read historically and globally, we can come to a greater understanding, and perhaps it gives us some perspective into the ways that we might be able to overcome the many significant problems that we're dealing with today. It can be hard to be hopeful, but without empathy, there is no hope. So for me, the empathy that comes from listening and hearing and reading other stories is fundamental to moving towards any kind of better future.
We hope today's conversations have given you the desire and the appetite to discover more about our Canadian authors and illustrators. I'm Hal Wake in Vancouver. Thanks for watching, but most of all, for reading.
Pour en savoir plus sur les auteurs, les illustrateurs et les événements à venir concernant la présence canadienne à la Foire de Francfort, visitez le site internet canadafbm2020.com. Ici Claudia La Rochelle à Montréal. Merci d'avoir été des nôtres aujourd'hui et tchuss!